Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and I know how New Jersey is going to sink. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I know what is going to cause it in 10 years, 100 years, whatever the case is. Museum ships don't sink because of the water outside of them. We typically do a pretty good job of treating the outside of the ship to preserve it. We sink from the water inside of the ship. That seems stupid, like it's not the fall that kills you, it's the rapid stop. But it's not ocean water getting into the ship that's going to sink us. It is water that is already inside the ship that's going to eat through and cause us to sink. The problem is the outside of the ship, the hull is relatively smooth, makes you hydrodynamic. The inside of the ship, you have all sorts of little areas that you cannot access. Those areas don't get painted and you can't tell if there's water in there. So that is allowed to sit against the paint, eats away the paint, and then it starts to eat away the steel from the inside out, and then it opens up a hole for the seawater to get in. And sooner or later, any of these museum ships that are still in the water are going to sink like that, hopefully after many decades of service. So we've got two examples of this on board the ship that we're going to talk about in this video today. Two examples that we have found in the last week on Battleship New Jersey. But first, if you're worried about sinking, you might be interested in buying property far away from the sea. Check out this message from our sponsor, Established Titles. Today's video is brought to you by Established Titles. Established Titles uses the ancient Scottish tradition of making landowners a laird or lady, lord or lady, by simple merit of owning property in Scotland. So Established Titles allows you to buy as little as 1 square foot of property in Scotland to become a Scottish lord or lady. This is a prefix like Mr. or Mrs. that you can put on things like your plane tickets, your credit cards, and even your dating profiles. That one's my favorite. They send you a certificate like this one. I'm Lord Ryan Szymanski now. Established Titles makes a great last-minute gift idea. Remember, the holiday season is approaching. And they donate to One Trees Planted and Trees for the Future. I absolutely love this environmentalism about the company. Remember to use the discount code BATTLESHIP to get 10% off your next purchase. And the first 200 people who purchase will get a plot right next to mine in the same kingdom. Established Titles makes a great last-minute gift, and they're running an amazing sale right now in addition to our discount code, so go over there soon. Go to establishedtitles.com/battleship and use the discount code BATTLESHIP to get your gifts now and support our channel and our museum. So we're up here on the bow of the ship where Iowa-class battleships have large hatches for the crew to get down to the berthing compartment. These hatches have large coamings built around them, as you can see here. And this keeps the waves coming over the bow of the ship from running straight down those hatches. Typically, outside this hatch is covered in wood. So we've ripped up the wood, we're starting to treat the steel underneath, and as is common, in the coaming 2 inches above the bottom of the deck, like right on top of where the wood is, you see that part of the steel deteriorated more. And sure enough, when we got the guys going around needle gunning on it, they put a hole in the side. The water sitting here was so bad that it eventually ate a hole through. And you can see the base of this right at the 2-inch mark, right on top of where the teak deck sat. The water is pretty heavily, or the steel is pretty heavily deteriorated. And any of you guys who don't know what I'm talking about when I say a needle gun, it's a pneumatic tool with a bunch of needles on it that you use, and these needles come out and hit it like multiple pistons, and that chips off your old paint and rust to get you back to nearly white metal that you can safely paint on. So they're doing this work, they punch this hole. We're in the top end of the hatch up here. The ship curves up this way towards the bow. So When they cut that hole in the top end, they were not expecting water to start pouring out. This hatch had a cover over it, so it wasn't a tripping hazard up here on the bow, and so it wasn't holding water every time it rained. So the cover had to be made of 4 different plates, and they are just tack welded down. I'm not sure if this was done in mothballs or when the ship was a museum, but it seems like at some point in the last 20 or 30 years, since the ship was deactivated, that plate started leaking. And so water got in here and sat. There's no air movement in here, so it wasn't evaporating. It was just sitting against the steel. So we painted the outside of this time and time again. Obviously, we couldn't paint down where the wood was, so you see that looks like it needs some paint. But even though we're consistently painting this, we still get a hole on the inside. And that's not the water that's outside doing it on its own. That is the water on the inside combined with that. And I suspect by the time we finish needle gunning this, we'll find some more holes. That tends to be the trend. If you find one, there is more. So there are dozens and dozens of places of where rainwater gets in like this and then just sits and eats away the steel. So rainwater like this is one issue. Let's head below, I'll show you the other one. Besides rainwater, the other source of failures on these ships are their own plumbing. We keep water going through the original plumbing because we use a lot of the original bathrooms on board, so the guests have somewhere to use the bathroom when they're on board. We do events, we have school group tours, we have thousands of people every year come on board, so we need facilities for those people, which means running water through the 80-year-old pipes. And those fail significantly more than the rest of the ship. It could take water decades to eat through the steel of the ship, but the plumbing is not armored like the rest of the vessel. So we came in here one day earlier this week. A visitor leaving had said that the dental office, which is where we are, starboard side, second deck, pretty far forward, the dental office had 2 inches of water in it. We're like, what the heck? There's no water in dental. There's no known leaks in that area. There are some known leaks that we keep an eye on, that every once in a while we'll let water get into the ship. Then when somebody says, hey, there's water in this passageway, like, oh yeah, that's nothing. We know what that is. But when they said there was 2 inches of water in dental, that really made me scratch my head. I came in here and sure enough, there's 2 inches of water in dental. We're in the forward part of dental, the high end. All of the water was in the aft end of dental. So that illustrates something else we'll come back to. And so I go in there and I'm like, oh, holy cow. I'm looking at pipes and stuff for leaks, holes, any running water. Obviously that much water over the course of a day, there's an active leak somewhere. So I work my way forward all the way to the front, and this sink was turned on. This sink should not be able to work, and you may or may not be able to see it in frame, but I am behind a plexiglass barrier right now that prevents guests from getting back here. But it's got a gap on the bottom. Somebody could have climbed over the top or crawled under the bottom and turned on this sink for whatever reason. So, when the ship was decommissioned, a lot of the plumbing was disassembled intentionally to allow the dehumidified air that is being piped through the ship as part of the decommissioning and mothballing process to get into those pipes and dry them out. So these sinks all over the ship have their U-traps underneath removed, and it's just laying on the deck in here under the cabinet. And when we reactivate a space to open it for tours, we reassemble all that plumbing or put in something new. So this sink is not something that anyone is supposed to be using. We are directly below an active bathroom head on the ship, so there should be no need to use this. And it doesn't seem like anybody actually used it. They just came in and turned it on and left. And they didn't know that the water didn't go anywhere. And by all rights, there shouldn't be any water to this at all. The valves here, the cold water and hot water coming down to the sink, are both closed. However, it turns out that these valves, they are almost certainly 40 years old. This dental space was heavily overhauled in 1982, so this plumbing probably dates to that time period. The hot water valve no longer seats properly. So when you open up the drain, it allows the water in even though the water is supposedly turned off here at the valve. So they turned it on, they didn't know it wasn't draining, and just walked out. Even if the sink was draining properly, it would go into a holding tank, which is not designed to hold continuous water. And then all of a sudden we'd start to have alarms going off that the holding tank was filling up for some reason. And if that backs up, the holding tank will come up from the low spot in the line. So that's probably not this sink for the forward holding tank, but whichever sink or toilet that is, you'll get the water coming up and still flood. So folks, when you visit a museum ship, make sure you turn the water off. The water leaks out of here. You can see that it's contained in the base of the cabinet. Well, eventually it gets to a point where it comes out of there. The problem with these 80-year-old vessels is watertight bulkheads are no longer watertight. So even with this bulkhead here, this around it, the water starts to try and get to the low spot, and it finds holes in the steel because this thing's been sitting here for so long, and it works its way to the low spot in the room. So in the case of dental, that means it comes all the way back here and sits down in the corner. So we first come in here and we're like, oh God, there's water here. None of the plumbing or anything here seems to be an issue. And then you keep working your way up until you find the dry spot. And that's probably where the leak is. Fortunately, in this instance, we're on second deck. We're right above the armored citadel. So we are standing on 6 inches of armor plate. Other museum ships I've worked on, or other floods on this ship that have not been on the armored deck, the water has not only worked its way back on this level, it has worked its way down to lower decks. So you see 2 inches of water standing up here on second deck. You go down to third deck and you find even more flooding down there. So fortunately, we caught this a couple hours after someone turned it on. We don't have enough staff to go through the whole ship all day, every day. So it was a visitor that saw it. You may be thinking that visitors are the worst thing possible for museum ships because they do stupid stuff like turn the water on, not knowing that it doesn't drain and leave it there. But without visitors, we wouldn't find most of these problems. On an average day, I go from the gangway to my office and from there to a couple other spots. I don't see the whole tour route. So if there were not guests coming through and checking out all these spaces, we would not know that we even had a problem. And that doesn't just count for problems that guests created in the first place, rainwater intrusion or any number of other things inside the ship are discovered by you guys when you come out and visit our museum ships. And that's one of my biggest motivations for continuously opening more and more of the tour route. 1.5 miles of tour route might seem like a lot, but it's less than 20% of the total ship, which means that 80% of the ship is maybe getting seen once a quarter when we do inspections. My goal would be to one day have every single door on the ship open so that if you can't walk in there, at least you can look in and see what used to be there. And then also you are part of the maintenance department of the ship and you can report, hey, you know, that room that we saw down there with the 1980s dental equipment had some water in it. Now again, fortunately, we caught this within a couple of hours. We were able to de-water before we went home that day. So there isn't a long-term issue of water sitting against the steel of the ship. But there has clearly been an issue that it came down through 3 different bulkheads to get to this point, which fortunately it didn't go any lower. Over time, over the next 10 years, over the next 100 years, as this ship continues to age and not get the full maintenance that an active duty ship would get, we will continue to see progressive failing like that will eventually lead to water being able to freely flow throughout the ship, whether it comes in through rain or comes in through the plumbing. So that is what I know in my heart of hearts will sink New Jersey one day and will sink most other floating museum ships. What are some other risks you can think of besides visitors? Let us know in the comments section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses, and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. We really appreciate the support of this video's sponsor, Established Titles. Remember to check out the link in the description below and use the discount code Battleship to get a couple of great deals as we go into the holiday season. It makes a great last-minute gift idea. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.